Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience for running just a few minutes late, not too many. Not bad for a museum, right? 4 minutes late. The art just got a little bit older. We're good. But thank you for laughing at that. Good afternoon, though, in all seriousness. My name is Ainsley Cameron, and I'm the curator of South Asian art, Islamic art, and antiquities here at the Cincinnati Art Museum. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you, on behalf of the museum, to the first Markarian Foundation lecture here. I want to thank the Markarian Foundation for making this series a reality. And I want to thank everybody who came here tonight and this afternoon and already shared their personal stories in connection with Mr. Markarian. So that's wonderful to hear and to see. For over a decade, the Foundation has been a steadfast and generous patron of the Cincinnati Art Museum. Their remarkable contributions include an earlier donation of historic rugs, funds for conservation, and the sponsorship of a custom-built display case upstairs in Gallery 143. The Anuin Shekhar Mitra Gallery of South Asian Art. Currently on display in that display case is an early 17th century Iranian rug with scenes of nature integrated into the design. And this rug was beautifully conserved only last year with Markarian funds. So do take a look at it next time you're in the gallery, and do know that we are very busy behind the scenes caring and conserving for our collections. Over the years, these gifts from the Markarian Foundation have empowered us to preserve and showcase extraordinary textiles from the wider Islamic world, to illuminate the rich and diverse heritage of rug making, and to foster cross-cultural understanding and scholarly exploration. As the inaugural event, today's Markarian lecture promises to deepen this dialogue and inspire enduring appreciation for these magnificent works of art. Our speaker today is Dr. Margaret Squires, an art historian who specializes in the art and architecture of early modern Iran, with a particular focus on carpets and textiles. Dr. Squires recently completed her PhD at the Courtauld Institute of Art in London, where she is now a postdoctoral teaching fellow. She brings a wealth of both teaching and museum experience to her work. At the Courtauld, she has taught courses on Islamic art and Persian visual culture, and she has also lectured at institutions including SOAS, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. In the museum world, she has worked as a curatorial assistant at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, where she contributed to major exhibitions and catalogs of Islamic art, and more recently as a consulting researcher at the Gulbenkian Museum in Lisbon, Portugal. Dr. Squires' dissertation reframed carpets woven in Iran's Safavid period as central elements of architectural design and experience. Long appreciated by scholars and connoisseurs for their intricate patterns, rich hues, and fine weaves, Safavid carpets are rarely considered in the context of which they were originally made. In today's lecture, we will explore the integral role of carpets in Iranian palaces, shrines, and garden pavilions of the 16th and 17th centuries, and reveal not only the artistic sophistication of carpet weaving in this period, but the social and cultural significance of the medium as well. So thank you for sharing your Sunday afternoon with the Cincinnati Art Museum. Dr. Squires, may I please welcome you to the podium now? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking Ainsley Cameron and Maria Jenkins for the kind invitation to come to Cincinnati, and to the Markarian Foundation for generously sponsoring this lecture. And of course, thank you to all of you for coming today to spend your Sunday afternoon with me. Today we'll explore how Safavid carpets, renowned for their technical and artistic sophistication, were not mere decorative objects or luxury goods, but integral components of the spaces for which they were made. The Safavid period, which lasted from 1501 to 1722, is considered a golden age in the art of carpet weaving in Iran. Some of the most magnificent carpets ever woven in any time or place were produced in Iran during this period, known for their sophisticated designs and technical mastery as well. One of the distinct aspects of carpet weaving in this period is that professional artists created designs on paper, which carpet weavers then reproduced in hand-knotted pile. This example, a detail from a 16th century Safavid carpet, shows how these kind of painted images were translated into incredibly finely woven knotted pile, in this case silk. So you can see how the two media really complemented each other in this period to create these masterpieces of carpet weaving. The art of carpet weaving is actually much older than the Safavid period, but due to the inherent fragility of the medium made using natural fibers of wool, silk, and cotton, very few, almost no carpets survive from prior to the early 16th century. We know, though, from paintings like the one on the left, a folio from the great Mongol Shahnameh, painted around 1330, that carpet weaving was already a sophisticated artistic medium 2 centuries before the Safavid period. So by 1501, this was already a mature art form that reached its apogee over the next 2 centuries. I've highlighted the carpet in the 14th century painting with this red rectangle, just so you can focus in on some of the details. And you can see that it has this incredibly rich pattern in the central field, and then an intricate pseudo-calligraphic pattern in the border. So again, an art form that developed over centuries leading up to the Safavid period that we're talking about today. For more than a century, scholars and collectors have tended to approach carpets as flat, static objects, a view underscored by their reproduction in books, like the early historical texts shown on the left, and their display in exhibitions. I took this photo on the right recently at the Frieze Masters Art Fair in London, and you can just see, I think, really vividly here how the carpet fragments mounted and hung on the wall appear like these flat, two-dimensional paintings. In carpet scholarship, there has been an obsession with taxonomy and attribution, questions of who made which carpet, when, and where. And these are goals that primarily serve the art market. There's also been an overemphasis on the European afterlives of these carpets, I think because of the lack of information about their original contexts. My perspective frames Safavid carpets as dynamic objects, critical to shaping space and experience in Safavid Iran. Safavid carpets are deeply entwined with their Iranian cultural context and have culturally specific meanings that can only be understood if we consider them within the places for which they were originally made. Today's talk moves away from connoisseurship and toward context and experience. We'll consider how people in Safavid Iran lived with carpets, how they provided a woven ground for leisure, ceremony, and worship. To do so, I'll focus on 3 broad contexts: sacred spaces, palaces, and gardens, each revealing a different aspect of carpet's spatial experiential dimensions. We begin with one of the most celebrated textiles in the world, the Ardabil carpet, one of the treasures of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Its minutely detailed design, with a central medallion on a ground of scrolling vines, flowers, and leaves, has been admired for centuries. Lamps hang from chains on either side of the central medallion. In looking at this, I want you to keep in mind that this entire object and all of the carpets we'll be looking at today are made of individually hand-tied knots. So to create something with this fine of a pattern required an estimated 3 million knots to be tied. It's incredible, isn't it? The Ardabil carpet was woven for the shrine of Sheikh Safiuddin Ardabili. This shrine is located in northwestern Iran. It's the burial place of the spiritual founder of the Safavid dynasty, Sheikh Safiuddin. The Safavids were actually a mystical order who followed Safiuddin. The connection of the dynasty to this religious order was an important aspect of their claim to legitimacy and their right to rule over Iran. Members of the Safavid royal family were also buried in this shrine in close proximity to the saint. It became a pilgrimage site for the Safavids and was also home to members of the Sufi mystical order. The Safavid royals gave money to the shrine, paid for renovations, and donated lavish gifts, including carpets, manuscripts, and ceramics. This carpet, one of the reasons it's so special, is because it's one of a very small number with a signature and a date woven into its pile. The date is written according to the Hijri calendar, 946, which corresponds to 1539 to 40 in the Common Era, putting it in the reign of Shah Tahmasp. I'm going to read the inscription for you in Persian so you can get a sense of what it sounds like. Juz astane toam dar jahan panahi nist. Sar mara be juz in dar havalegaahi nist. Amal bande dargah maksud kashani. And the translation below, except for thy threshold, there is no refuge for me in all the world. Except for this door, there is no resting place for my head. The work of the servant of the court, Maksud of Kashan, year 946. You could probably hear from the Persian reading that the first two lines have a pleasing sound and rhythm. That's because they're a quotation from the classical Persian poet Hafiz. The threshold or door in this context can be read as a metaphor for the shrine itself. The Ardabil carpet is actually the Ardabil carpets. It was originally one of a pair. The carpets remained in the shrine on the floor from the 16th century until the end of the 19th century. At this point, the roof of one of the buildings in the shrine had collapsed, and they needed to raise funds to repair the shrine. This happened at the same time that there was a growing interest in collecting Persian carpets among European museums and private collectors. So the carpets were sold out of the shrine, and at the time they were in a fragmentary state of preservation. Knowing that a complete or whole carpet would fetch a higher price on the market, the dealer who purchased them made the decision to use fragments from both to create one complete carpet, leaving the second carpet in the truncated state. And I'm also showing you here a lot of these little bits and pieces that were left over from this restoration process, some of which are in public and private collections, and some of which even still come up on the market today. Just a little interesting tidbit about this. The piece that you can see here sold at Sotheby's in London for £80,000 just for this tiny fragment. So you can see the kind of mystique that this carpet has around it, that even a tiny piece of it is incredibly highly valued. So after this process took place, the complete carpet was brought to London to be exhibited, where it was seen by William Morris, the British textile designer, who was absolutely enchanted by its beauty. He even started a public fundraising campaign to purchase the carpet for the then South Kensington Museum, now the Victoria and Albert Museum. This campaign was successful, and the carpet has been in the V&A ever since. The other carpet, the smaller one, was quietly sold to an American tycoon, eventually ending up in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. But at the time, the sale was on the condition that the smaller carpet never returned to England, as the legend of the larger carpet as a masterpiece of singular perfection was part of its selling point. By the late 19th century, the carpet was no longer functioning as a devotional ground, but as a collectible object, a shift from sacred use to museum display. Returning to their original context, there isn't certainty about where the carpets were originally displayed, but if placed side by side, they would have fit into a domed space within the shrine known as the Janat Sarah. This idea is supported by the current display in this building of a replica carpet inside the space in Iran. Returning to the carpet's design, there is no figural imagery because of this religious context for which they were made. The hanging lamps are a distinctive and unusual feature, more often found on prayer carpets. They may evoke a verse in the Quran that compares divine light to the light emanating from a glass lamp in a niche. If the article carpet represents the devotional carpet at the dawn of the Safavid dynasty, our next example, the carpet woven for the shrine of Shah Nimmatullah Valley in Mahan, belongs to its maturity a century later, when carpet weaving had reached new heights of complexity. Commissioned for the mausoleum of Shah Nimmatullah Valley, a 15th century Sufi saint revered across Iran and India, the carpet was designed to be placed in the Shah's tomb chamber around the cenotaph shown on the right. This shrine is located in the city of Mahan, far from the capital in Kerman province in central Iran. The Nimmatullahi Sufi order skillfully aligned itself with the dominant religion, Safavid Twelver Shi'ism, which allowed this shrine to flourish under Safavid rule. The shrine complex became a major pilgrimage site, centered on a domed tomb chamber with a marble cenotaph marking the saint's grave. And it's actually still a pilgrimage site today. At the heart of the complex stands a domed chamber built in the 1430s. The carpet was designed in modular pieces to cover the entire floor of the tomb chamber precisely, fitting around the cenotaph and the recesses in all four walls. It was created as a permanent furnishing, a woven ground for prayer and veneration rather than a movable luxury object. And this function is attested by the fact that the carpet remained in the shrine for nearly 250 years. The carpet is signed by Ustad-e Mu'min Qutb ad-Din ibn Mahani and dated twice, in one inscription, 1066, and 1067 in another. These dates correspond to 1655 to 57 in the Common Era. The two dates also indicate that the carpet was created over a number of years. Again, if you think about the 3 million knots of the earlier carpet, you can imagine that these major carpet commissions took years to complete. Like the person whose name is inscribed on the Ardabil carpets, Qutb ad-Din ibn Mahani was more likely a designer or a workshop supervisor than a weaver himself, given that these carpets were woven by teams of weavers working side by side. The carpet is woven in a very particular technique known in carpet studies as the vase technique, with jewel-toned silks and wool in rich reds, blues, greens, and yellows. This technique is associated with this particular region of Iran, the Kerman province. It also includes poetic inscriptions in, I'll show you here, these cartouches that would have been placed around the tomb. One of them reads, "The carpet rubbed its forehead to the Shah's tomb." An anthropomorphizing inscription that frames the carpet as a humble devotee bowing before the saint. Now, you might have noticed that I've only shown you so far details of this carpet because it survives in a fragmented state. This is kind of a recurring theme here. It remained in situ, like I said, for nearly 250 years. And in a parallel story to what happened to the Ardabil carpet, it was sold in the 1890s. And possibly on this occasion, we're not really sure, it was cut into fragments at some point. So like the Ardabil carpet, it may have been in poor condition and the decision was made, I've looked at this in person, to actually cut it up into smaller pieces. It ended up in the National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina in Sarajevo. And the fragments now in Sarajevo represent roughly 2/3 of the original carpet. I've digitally reconstructed the complete carpet based on my technical analysis of the fragments. So here you can see how it filled the space and surrounded the tomb. The fragments are still incredibly beautiful, with remarkably rich colors given their age. And they're historically important due to their traceable connection to this specific shrine. When the carpet was in place, it would have transformed the tomb into a paradise garden. Paradise is described in the Quran as a verdant garden scented with musk. Legends from this period describe the scent of musk emanating from the tombs of holy figures, evidence that they were living in paradise. When placed over Shah Nimbatullah Vali's tomb, the carpet had a similar evocative effect, a miraculous eternal paradise garden whose jewel-toned blossoms still remain bright. Sacred spaces in Safavid Iran also served other religious traditions, including Christianity. Shah Abbas I forcibly resettled the Armenian community from Julfa in 1606 amid war between the Safavids and the Ottomans in the Caucasus region. The Armenian community was particularly valuable to Shah Abbas as they played an important role in the silk trade. Shah Abbas established an Armenian quarter within the capital city of Isfahan, known as New Julfa, which included Christian churches, the most spectacular of which is the magnificent Venk Cathedral, completed between 1655 and 1664. The church's interior decoration includes Christian iconography of angels and scenes from the Bible, set against ornament that derives from the Persianate vocabulary, including these scrolling vines, split leaves, and floral motifs rendered in gold against a blue background. This priest's garment was woven for the Armenian Christian community in Isfahan in the mid-17th century. It's now in the collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. While this example doesn't exactly fall into the category of woven ground, it is technically still a carpet. It's actually woven with knotted pile, using an extremely fine silk weave so that it's still light and flexible enough to be worn as a garment. The semicircular shape is that of a cope, and it would have draped over a priest's shoulders. Its imagery includes the Annunciation, which would have been on the front part of the cope. You can see here. And the Crucifixion, which would have been at the priest's back. These motifs are set against the typical motifs of Safavid carpet design: scrolling vines, flowers, and graceful split leaves. At some point, I feel like a broken record here, it was cut into fragments. but it has been digitally reconstructed by the Victoria and Albert Museum so that we can get a sense of its original form. So you can see here how it would have draped over the shoulders of the priest. I wanted to include this object because it really exemplifies the multiculturalism of 17th century Isfahan and the adaptability of carpet weaving to different contexts and uses. Like the previous examples, this carpet mediates between the body and religious space and combines religious symbolism with the ornamental vocabulary of Safavid carpets. Having seen carpets in shrines and churches, spaces of prayer and contemplation, let's now step into the royal world of Safavid palaces, where carpets became stages for ceremony and power. The Ali Qapu, a palace in the city of Isfahan, was located at the center of the Maidan, a massive public square constructed in Isfahan in the early 17th century, after Shah Abbas I made the city the new capital of the Safavid Empire. The Ali Qapu, which in English means lofty gate, translates to lofty gate, functioned as both a palace and a gate into the royal precinct. So you can see in this image how on the right, there's the public space of the Maidan, this massive public square. And then through the palace, one enters the Dawlat Khane, the royal precinct, which is behind the palace in this image. It was used for court ceremonies and audiences with foreign ambassadors. I want us to focus in on this audience hall on the second floor, shown in the image on the right. Every facet of the audience hall's walls and ceiling, which are rendered in these complex architectural forms, is covered in carved and gilded plaster. While no carpet survives that can be traced directly to the palace, historical observers tell us that this room was once lined with carpets of silk, silver, and gold. While we don't have any specific carpets that can be traced to this palace, similar examples survive that match these descriptions. These carpets, like this example in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, are woven with silk pile and extensive metal wrap thread brocading in the background. Their designs consist of floral and vegetal motifs, sometimes set in these geometric designs, in this case, a lattice pattern. Both the designs and surface effects of these carpets blend seamlessly with the interior of this palace. So much so that I have argued that this palace is actually the origin point of this carpet type, that this interior and this new type of carpet were designed in conjunction with each other for this new capital city. Now, you may have observed that this carpet has a different color palette than the previous examples, more pastel hues. Well, this is actually because of the use of silk for the pile, which in these carpets has not held their original colors as well. But there's actually an incredible example in another Ohio museum, which shows it's really a model to tell us what the colors of this entire group of carpets looked like. So you can see in this example that it actually has these bright, saturated oranges, greens, yellows, browns, turquoise, against this glittering background. So we can look at this carpet and imagine how the rest of the examples in this category originally looked. In the Ali Qapu, with its textile-like walls and ceiling, these carpets created the awe-inspiring impression of a room completely lined with silk, silver, and gold, showing off the wealth and cultural sophistication of the Safavid court. A short walk from the Ali Rapu is another Safavid palace, known as the Chihil Satun, or 40 Columns Palace. This palace was completed under Shah Abbas II in the year 1647. Like the Ali Rapu, it was the site of royal feasts and ceremonies. Large-scale paintings in the interior depict triumphs of the Safavids over the Mughals and the Uzbeks. You can see one of these paintings in the image on the left. The ceiling decoration might remind you of the images I showed earlier of Vank Cathedral, because these two buildings are from around the same time. But it has these rich colors and these ornamental motifs, the scrolling vines, these lotus palmettes and other flowers, rendered in gold on these richly hued backgrounds. The large audience hall was once completely covered with a massive carpet imported from the Deccan region of India. The carpet was an estimated 60 feet long, an incredible technical feat at this time. The carpet's scale was designed to impress, making visitors feel small in this grand and magnificent space. Like the carpet from Mahan, it's also a puzzle of fragments. It has a complex history that I don't have time to cover thoroughly here, but I wanted to highlight it because there's a piece of it here in Cincinnati, outlined in red. The carpet, originally woven in modular pieces to achieve this massive scale, was later dismantled into fragments which were scattered to 11 different museum and private collections, literally across the world. This slide shows the fragments that I've been able to trace, as well as a digital reconstruction of what the complete carpet probably looked like. It's historically important because it demonstrates the integration of Safavid carpets with architecture, a phenomenon which happened increasingly during the 17th century. It's similar to the Mahan carpet from the Sufi shrine that I discussed earlier, because it goes to technical extremes to cover the entire floor in what appears to be a seamless way. During royal ceremonies in this palace, hundreds of courtiers, musicians, and dancers and servers filled the hall and filled the carpet. One historical observer, a French visitor to the Chihil Satun in the 17th century, noted that the massive carpet muffled the noise. He said, "One does not notice there the slightest confusion, nor the slightest noise. One does not hear people stirring there. The one attends on one side, and the other attends on another. This good order comes, as I think, from three things which are peculiar to the Orientals. The first, that those who serve are barefoot and walk on carpets, which prevents noise." I'm sorry, I don't remember what the other two things were. The carpet orchestrated imperial order through its genre-defying scale and acoustic effects. If the shrine carpets we saw earlier meditated on paradise, this one materialized earthly sovereignty. Now let's move outdoors. Beyond palaces and shrines, Safavid life unfolded in gardens. Palaces were set within them, and they were an important part of the urban landscape of cities like Isfahan. Carpets played a vital role here too, defining intimate enclosures within the open air. At the same time, carpets could also function as gardens themselves, even in indoor spaces. A carpet spread out in a garden can create an inhabitable interior zone. Paintings, like the two examples on this slide, show this kind of functionality. The carpets create a dry and comfortable place to sit, but they also create an intimate zone for 2 or 3 people to sit in, almost like a portable room without walls. This small carpet, of a similar scale to the carpets shown in the 2 paintings on the previous slide, is designed for, again, 2 to 3 people to sit side by side within its wide borders. The 2 sitters would have been immersed in a fantastical garden with swirling vines, blossoms, birds, and mythical beasts, and enclosed by these wide borders with Persian poetry. With its finely knotted wool pile and silk warps and wefts, this carpet would have been pliable and lightweight, easily picked up and moved around. Rolled up and carried to a garden or outdoor pavilion and layered with cushions and felts, this carpet became like a movable room. It even invites such an experience through the inscription woven into its border, another poem by Hafiz, which I'll again read. I love Persian poetry, so I hope you'll indulge my poetry readings today. This one reads, Masnad be gulistan bar, ta shahed u sagi ra, lab giri u rukh busi, may nushi u gul buyi. And the English translation reads, take the cushion to the garden, kiss the lip and face of the beloved and the cupbearer, drink wine and smell roses. It's lovely, isn't it? This poem could almost be read as take the carpet to the garden. And you can imagine 2 lovers sitting on this carpet in a garden, drinking wine and smelling the roses, as instructed by Hafiz. A carpet can also simulate the outdoor environment of a Persian garden within an interior space. We've already seen something like this with the Mahan carpet from the Sufi shrine. But a carpet could also evoke a garden within a secular space. The most famous example of this phenomenon comes from pre-Islamic Iran. The legendary Baharistan carpet was said to cover the entire area under the arch of the palace of Tag Kesra, or Ctesiphon, a Sasanian palace constructed between the 3rd and 6th century in present-day Iraq. The Arab historian Tabari describes it as follows, quote, the kings of Persia used it in winter when there was no more greenery or flowers. The whole border was embroidered with green emeralds, so that whoever sat on this rug believed to be seeing an orchard or a field of greenery. Precious stones of different colors represented all kinds of fragrant herbs and flowers, end quote. Like I said before, very few carpets woven in Iran prior to the 16th, let alone the 6th century survive. So we can't know beyond this description what this carpet would have looked like, if indeed it ever really existed. But the idea of the carpet as an eternal garden with the ability to transform winter to spring, indoors to outdoors, was a persistent one in Persian culture. This carpet, woven in Iran in the 16th century, exemplifies this idea of carpet as garden. Its design radiates around a central pool inhabited by a circle of ducks, evocative of the water features present in many Persian gardens. Surrounding the central medallion are cypresses and other flowering trees, a verdant landscape inhabited by real and mythical animals. The entire design is oriented so that, go back to this image, when sitting at the center of the carpet, one would have felt immersed in a lush gardenscape. Across these 3 settings, the shrine, the palace, and the garden, we have traced how Safavid carpets anchored space. They mediated between the earthly and heavenly realms, between ruler and subject, and between architecture and the human body. Seen this way, Safavid carpets are no longer static objects to be viewed as woven pictures, but a woven ground that evokes court ceremony, sacred ritual, and intimate exchange. I welcome your questions during the Q&A.
so much, Margaret. That was wonderful. And we do have some time for some questions and a very willing speaker. So if you just want to raise your hand, we're going to wait till the mic gets to you so that everyone in the audience can hear your question. Maria's on that side, and I'll be on this side to take questions. All right, we got our first one.
What does the term Safavid encompass?
So here, I'll go back to, sorry for the whiplash here. Yes, so just to have this image as a background for this answer, the Safavids were both a dynasty and a religious order. So the dynasty, the political dynasty, emerged out of a mystical order founded in the previous century. And so this shrine is home to the tomb of this Sufi saint, Sheikh Safi ad-Din. And the religious order eventually became a military and political power that ended up ruling over Iran from 1501 to 1722. Like many Islamic dynasties, the Safavids claim descent from Ali and the Prophet Muhammad. And so this kind of political and religious power were deeply intertwined. And that's really exemplified through this shrine and the carpet that was woven for it. Yeah?
Well, if you see a carpet that is Persian or
Yeah.
originated in Iran, how can you tell what's a Safavid carpet and what is, is there another kind of Persian carpet that's not Safavid?
Yes.
And is it a matter of age or is it a matter of design? Is it a matter of elements? Is it a matter of size? Is it a matter of colors? I still don't really, I understand the origin. What I don't understand is what distinguishes it from other Persian carpets or other Orient.
Yeah, so a Safavid carpet would just refer to any carpet produced in Iran between 1501 and 1722, when this was the ruling dynasty. I would say the way that you know you're looking at a Safavid carpet is if you're in a museum. Because most of these, I mean, there are some of them in private hands, certainly, but most of them are really considered as collectible works of art at this point, because we're talking about carpets that are, 300 to 400 years old at this point. And in terms of designs, as you can see, like all the carpets that I've shown in this presentation are Safavid carpets. So there's really a wide range of styles and motifs. And they also range in terms of technique and materials used. Some are wool, some are silk, but in general, that category of Safavid carpets really refers just to that historical period between 1501 and 1722. And in terms of other categories of carpets from this period, there are also carpets produced in the Ottoman Empire, which was in modern-day Turkey and parts of the Levant and North Africa. So there were also carpets produced in those regions at this time, as well as carpets from Mughal India. So those are really the three major carpet-producing regions in this time period of the 16th and 17th centuries, which is really considered as a kind of classical period in carpet production. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So in terms of, just to elaborate for anyone who's not as familiar with prayer carpets, carpets have an important practical function within the Islamic 5 daily prayers, which involves prostrating on the floor. So the carpet provides not only a soft surface on which to do that, but also a clean, kind of sanctified area. And so the typical prayer carpet design normally consists of a kind of vertical niche, so like almost an architectural form of an arch on columns. This also helps to orient the worshiper toward Mecca, so it has like a directionality to it. And those can either be in individual prayer carpets, or sometimes there are larger carpets that have multiple niches like that. That would be in a mosque or some kind of communal prayer space. So there's actually some, it's kind of a question that I have actually about when these kinds of carpets first emerged in Safavid Iran. There are very few surviving prayer carpets in that niche format from this period. There's one group of them that's similar to the carpet that I showed toward the end that has the poem about the garden. But there are a lot of kind of questions about those. But I think, yeah, from my perspective, they did exist, but it's kind of an open question to what extent was that specific type of prayer carpet with the individual niches used in the early Safavid period. But certainly something like this carpet could also have been a surface on which people prayed or worshipped, yes. So I think when that individual niche design comes in, particularly in Iran, we're not completely sure.
Bringing us to modern times, what is the current state of carpet making in Iran?
Yeah, so carpets, hand-woven carpets are still produced in large numbers today in Iran. Yeah. Today they use a lot more computer-assisted design techniques. So these carpets that I've shown today from the Safavid period were designed with drawings on paper. And then, because an interesting thing about carpet design in this period is that they didn't have like fine enough graph paper to design carpets on. So if you think about carpet design as existing on a grid, so you have individual knots running horizontally and vertically. In this case, extremely fine. But in this period, they didn't have any kind of super fine graph paper or anything like that to actually create a specific knot-by-knot plan. So these carpets were woven based on to-scale paper cartoons, which were set up, and the weavers would just kind of fill in by hand however many knots for that motif. Whereas today, they're still using the same hand knotting techniques, but would use computers to have an actually really precise plan of like 3 red knots, 2 blue knots, 3 yellow knots, which is different. But yeah, this art form is very much still alive in Iran today.
So you spoke a little bit about how difficult it was to make these and the time consumption. So first, were there any formal or legal barriers like the English sumptuary laws that barred certain classes of people from even purchasing one? Or what was the accessibility within Iranian society to access or have the purchasing power to have an art piece of a carpet in your home?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So carpet weaving is today and has historically been a kind of rural and nomadic art form at its origins. So what we're looking at in these Safavid carpets is the highest level of production. So carpets woven for members of the Safavid court or for very wealthy courtiers, local officials, people like that. So these were produced in professional workshops. And because of that prestigious status that they had, these are the kinds of carpets that tended to survive from this period. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't also at the same time other levels of production. And so certainly, although we don't have any examples that can be traced to this period, we can be absolutely sure that there were nomadic people and people living in villages weaving carpets at the same time that these huge-scale Safavid carpets were woven. So while I've shown you, and it's really based on the evidence of the carpets that survive, the kind of high-level context of carpets in this period of royal palaces, dynastic shrines, and these kind of palace gardens. They were almost certainly part of every level of life in Iranian society. And we do have textual sources that describe carpets used in domestic settings like people's homes. So it was really part of life across the entire society.
In the oral tradition of the calling out of the knots and the designs, and how far back that can be traced as an oral tradition, and was it ever written down, and do any of them survive today?
Yeah, so you're referring to, there's this oral tradition that I think is recorded as early as the 19th century, where there would be a person in the carpet workshop calling out, sometimes in even a kind of song-like rhythm, 3 red knots, 2 blue knots, 1 yellow knot, something like that. But some really important scholarship by one of my mentors, Professor Walter Denny, who I believe maybe some of you have seen him lecture here before. He wrote an important study that showed if you look at Safavid carpets like this one, you can look at a motif like, for example, if you can see my cursor, this motif here and this motif here. So in terms of the drawing, this is the same little medallion. And so he looked at carpets like this with symmetrical motifs on both sides and actually measured the number of knots in that motif. So across, because carpets are woven row by row horizontally, and found that the number of knots in those motifs ranged widely. And he did that across many different Safavid carpets to really prove that they were not woven from a knot-by-knot plan, whether written out or called out, that it was actually, so if you can imagine there was a 2-scale drawing. This is, again, we don't have documentation of this, but this is something that he has surmised from the technical analysis of the carpets, that there must have been a paper drawing possibly set up behind the warps during the weaving process, that then the weavers, and some indication of the colors to be used, that the weavers would just fill in the motif with however many knots they determined would need to fill it up. So it was a more, and you know, as a result of this, in my kind of connoisseurial opinion, that's what gives these carpets their real beauty and power, is that they're not rigidly symmetrical, and there's this variation. It gives it a more human quality than the carpets that are woven using computer designs and this like extremely rigid knot count and symmetry. It gives it more dynamism because of this. Yeah. No, I mean that's true from in modern times, but not in Safavid carpets. Mm-hmm.
I think I have the next question. I'm really curious, how big is that rug that you're showing right now, and how far were these traded?
Oh, there you are. Sorry, I was trying to find you. That's okay. This rug is massive. So Based on my own encounters with it, I would estimate it's about as long as this stage. I didn't put the dimensions on here, but yeah, it's very, very large. It's not the largest Safavid carpet, but here you can see maybe from this image. So this is not the original carpet, but it's a 2-scale replica. So maybe this gives a kind of sense of its scale. And in terms of how far they reached, these carpets, especially in the 17th century, were traded widely across the world. So I didn't really talk about that in this lecture because I wanted to focus on the Iranian contexts. But throughout the 17th century, they became kind of an export commodity. So prior to that, carpets had been used as diplomatic gifts and this really like high-level exchange between the court and other royal courts in Europe and across the Islamic world. But in the 17th century, the European trading companies started trading in Safavid carpets, and some even made it as far as Japan. But they became very popular across Europe, and you can actually see Safavid carpets in a lot of European paintings from the 17th century, particularly Dutch paintings.
Oh, is it my turn? Okay. Hello. You showed us all the different colors in which those carpets were produced. I can imagine that plants can serve as pigments, but those really lush, deep colors, what were pigments being used and where did they come from?
Yeah, so this is, one of the reasons I love this period in art history, and especially of the Safavids, is that, like I mentioned before, this is the period of the rapid expansion of global trade. So analyses of the dye materials used in Safavid carpets have revealed a marked shift in the kinds of materials that were being used as dye stuffs. So in the 16th century, they were working mostly with locally available plant and insect dyes. So dyes found in Iran, but also slightly further afield. But then in the 17th century, you start to see an explosion of more colors, including dyes sourced from as far as the Americas. So again, the European trading companies were going and getting dyes like insect dyes, like this red, I don't know this, I haven't tested it, but this kind of purplish red on this carpet is probably lac, so an insect dye, whereas earlier carpets, you have a more orangey red, which comes from madder, which is a locally available root that grows in Iran. So yeah, this carpet, which is from 1655 to 57, again, I haven't actually tested the dyes in this, but I can assume from what I know about this period that its rich color palette reflects global sourcing for dye materials.
Actually, that was my question. The origin and trade networks necessary to support the pigments. So.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. So I'll get one more on this side, and Ainsley will get one more on that side, and then I'm sure that Margaret would be happy to talk to everyone else with questions afterward at the reception.
I just wanted to add that in terms of the question that was being asked about the size of this carpet, there was a 20 by 30 foot saruk from the 19th century that Mr. Markarian had restored, and it was from the Institute of the D.V. Tomei on Madison Road. And so he was able to have those parts of it that had been overused in their library to be put back as a single object. So even in the 19th century, they were still making these large carpets.
Yes, thank you for that. It's wonderful that he decided to handle it in that way instead of cutting it into smaller pieces like a lot of these other people who came across these carpets did.
I have a question again about size. I can't imagine a 60-foot warp.
Yeah.
Were these small pieces that were then pieced, or?
So, yeah, this is kind of the subject of like a whole other hour-long lecture. And this is something that came out during my dissertation research. So, yeah, the way that I had the same question. And yeah, I agree that it's unlikely. Also, the width of this carpet exceeds what I would consider to be the maximum loom width because, I don't know, I'm assuming maybe you're a weaver with that question? Yeah. So the vertical dimension of a carpet, there's more flexibility because although you would need an incredibly strong warp beam to support something that long, but you can actually roll it up, whereas the width is determined by the size of the loom. So when I started looking at this carpet, which again is in these small fragments, I knew, like, intuitively it wouldn't be possible to weave a carpet of that scale in one piece. And so through my technical analysis of the fragments, I determined that the weave direction was actually this way. So that indicated to me, so while it would already be difficult to weave a carpet 9 meters wide, you could certainly not weave a carpet of 60 feet width. And so that told me with certainty that it was made in modular pieces. And the same thing, I believe, is true of this carpet, which again, it's in fragments, so there are like some cut edges, but then again, from technical analysis and looking at the weave direction of the different pieces relative to the orientation of the pattern, I've determined that this one was also made in modular pieces. So this is kind of a phenomenon in Safavid carpet weaving in the 17th century that I, sort of, not discovered, but learned a lot more about through my dissertation research, and I'm still working on. But yeah, that's a distinctive innovation in the 17th century that I think comes about due to the desire to furnish spaces in this completely seamless way where the carpets are more integrated into the architecture rather than a kind of movable object that can be taken in and out of the building.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your questions.